Welcome to Digication Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff Yan. In this episode, you will hear part 2 of my conversation with Peter McLellan from Oxford College of Emory University. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of Digication Scholars Conversations can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. So I wanted to maybe talk a little bit about, you mentioned storytelling. I actually recently attended one of your storytelling workshop. Want to tell us about that and what you think about storytelling in the world of pedagogy, teaching, and learning?
Sure. I think a lot more of it now than I did like 6 months ago. So yeah, there was I, it actually started with the sort of this anti-racist kind of line of thinking, and thinking I was just kind of thinking about like how we assess portfolios. It was really early on, and so I just kind of emailed some people, and um, and said, I have some thoughts. What do you think? Which is I don't know if that's a good way of networking or not, but that's just kind of how my brain works. So I just kind of like threw some stuff out there, and
It
uh,
worked.
it worked. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tracy Penny Light got back to me, and she had connected me with Paul Wasco and then Elise Halam in at Puget
From
Sound,
Puget Sound. Mhm. And this is
and
Tracy Penny Late, who's at St. George's, but also a very renowned researcher in ePortfolios and
yeah.
pedagogy and gender studies, and she's also uh, the president of ABLE.
Yeah, yeah, and then I think she's the co-founder too of, oh my gosh, the Center for Research. Well, CRSE, Center for Research and Storytelling and Education. That's it.
Yeah.
There we go.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, she's she's the president of organizations with very long acronyms. And but anyway, she was. I mean, it was great. So we were able to connect and start thinking about like, well, what is it that's really happening here? That we can, you know, basically they helped me think about like, well, are you interested in assessment, or are you interested in stories? And so we started thinking about what's actually happening in portfolios and people telling stories, and so we put together a panel for a series that the CRSE was doing on digital storytelling, and so we were able to talk about digital storytelling and portfolios. But my interest in that is largely how people hear stories. I've come to think of myself as a scholar with a lot of privilege, and what that means for me is I need to hear, and this is to go back to haunting. I need to hear voices. I need to kind of dwell with sort of like people who are speaking and who I might not otherwise see or hear in my everyday life, and what are the stories that they're telling, and what is the knowledge that's carried within those stories. And so for me, it's there's lots of ways to think about storytelling and education. For my part, it's the hearing part that's most critical, and then so hearing those stories and then thinking about how they kind of like become part of who I am, and I'm decentering myself. It's a personal exercise. It's an academic exercise, and now thanks to my role at Oxford, it's a professional exercise as well. To hear what people are saying, and then to change my practice because it's changed me personally.
Hmm. I think it's really powerful. I mean, to me, when we started Digication almost like 20 years ago, actually over 20 years ago now, we had this idea that we can we can make there's a certain almost channel, a certain segment, a certain sliver of sort of educational experience that we really were drawn to, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't even called, we didn't even call it reflection, but it sort of feels a little bit like it, but it's one that has a social component to it, and we just call it storytelling and conversations. And um, and uh, but it does have that feel of, you could have done it at a campfire as much as you do it in a on a podium and all in the panel with multiple
Yeah.
people in a very formal way, or over coffee or drinks, or or a meal.
Hmm.
Um, we find that to be one of the most it's a very human thing to do, and it transcends sort of across different culture, and people break bread if you eat bread, but bread have meals, and like people like gather as families and friends together, and they're not only uh education, but they are also highly enjoyable. So in some ways, we've always wanted to see what a sort of a longer form sort of storytelling and conversation looks like, sort of in the 21st century, that can scale across, to to lots of people. And when you share your story, and the conversations can sort of carry on in a in this digital networked world. And so yeah, that's a really interesting set of little connection between what you were saying to how we started, Digication all those many years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Um, I was wondering whether in your work so far, having worked at both, Drew University and at Oxford, um, what are some of the patterns that you've seen so far, especially working with faculty? Because I think that there are a lot of folks that are your counterparts probably listening to this,
Hmm.
and some might be very experienced, and then some maybe just getting started. But regardless of experience, I think that everyone has had the experience of, I don't know how to get my faculty engaged,
Hmm.
or I'm having trouble getting certain faculty or certain programs engaged. Um, I'm sure that you have had your fair share of that as well. You
Yeah.
want to share some of your learning, your success and failures, whatever
Yeah.
that you think is best.
Yeah. I mean, that's the challenge. I think I have been fortunate to work in spaces where the the initiative, the curricular initiative that portfolios are a part of, has been well supported by the administration, and so like so that helps. So I
Yeah.
don't ever feel like I'm going it alone. Um, if something is just kind of just one more thing that, oh, the dean just wants to
Mm,
do this,
yeah.
and then there's no real strength behind it, that it just fizzles out. And I think that's true with any curricular initiative. And so I've been fortunate to be in situations where we've been well supported.
Mhm.
Um, and then it also helps, and these are just two broad observations. First, it also helps to have faculty who are just excited about teaching. And in both situations I was in, the faculty were, are intentional teachers, because you can do a lot of the pedagogy I think that portfolios afford you the opportunity to do without portfolios. They just make it better and enhance it, and allow for, well, the digital
Interesting.
world to become part of it, and
Right.
you know
So you're
but
looking to partner with faculty who already is more or less practicing the kind of
yeah, I
pedagogy.
mean, yeah. So we have, I mean, what are called early adopters, or faculty advocates, right? So if you find somebody who's, and not that we have this like official faculty office. This is just kind of how me and my team think about it, which is like you find folks who are your stars, who both are ready to try and are already doing it. Um, and are also well respected among their colleagues, right? Like people see them as the folks who will try out the new thing, and if
Mhm.
they like it, will carry it forward. So we have a number of those folks, and then kind of networking them together as well. So saying like, if somebody approaches me and says, "Well, I'm thinking about doing portfolios for this class," you can say, "Well, Professor X, Y, Z, whatever did this. Here's their assignment, and you
Hmm.
can kind of like trade those things back and forth. So we have this, we have kind of a we've got this like this basically a portfolio assignment for a course that has changed hands with all these different faculty, and
People just share.
everyone like
Yeah.
updates it a little bit, and
Yeah.
then I just kind of ask for it for them and then share it with other people, and
Hmm.
it's over the course of like 3 years, it's now come back to the person who originally wrote the assignment, and it's a little bit different here.
Yeah.
And so it's yeah, so it's just kind of, I mean, that way it's kind of fun. It's a community thing.
Hmm.
um but
Sort of like a community of practice almost, and
yeah,
the
yeah.
active support for each other a little bit. Yeah.
But I also think, and this is I mean, kind of the final thing is just letting faculty know that it's not easy. I mean, it's hard to teach with
Hmm.
portfolios. It's, for a lot of them, it's a new way of thinking
Hmm.
about a reflective practice, portfolio pedagogy, and just kind of letting them know this isn't going to be difficult, and I'm here to support you. And here are all the resources I have for you. So much of my time is spent creating resources for faculty, and just so that they can be approached in the right, they have what they need that exists in the right format for them. And
So
so.
you really pitch them as, look, it's hard, but first of all, I'm going to help you, but the real key question is it worth it, right?
Mhm.
Is it
Yeah.
worth doing this hard thing because it's going to be better for your students?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen you. I feel like I've seen you do it, and it's the faculty. I mean, it's interesting to think about the early adopters because they are more willing to do that. Tell me, what are some of the telltale signs that you see from faculty? The ones that you said are already sort of practicing this. What is that like really? How does that manifest if you're, I don't know, a writing professor or a something in STEM?
Mhm.
What does that look like?
Like when they're ready to do it.
Yeah, like the ones that you're like, oh, okay, this is the professor that probably is going to be a great. Like maybe they do
Yeah.
some, they always do project based stuff as
Yeah.
opposed to lectures.
Yeah. So, well, project based learning is, I mean, that those are the folks who are just like ready to go.
Right.
And it's like you tell them about, they might just ask you about what you do, and you tell them,
Mhm.
and then a light bulb goes off. It's like, wait a second, I could do this. I could use portfolios for this. Um, a lot of it, but that is a lot of it, is like just explain to folks like what what I do kind of helps them. So, and what that looks like for me is actually when I started at Oxford, I just like went to as many faculty as I could and just set up like half an hour meetings with them in their
Mhm.
offices at lunch, just to see what they did
Yeah.
and talk about what I did. And because I think portfolios kind of sell themselves, so I
Mhm.
don't really see myself as a salesperson. It's just kind of like explaining to them like, hey, this is good teaching. So that's where a lot of it happens, is faculty who hear what I do, see what their colleagues do,
Mhm.
and so I don't really need to know if they're ready or not.
Mhm.
They just kind of approach
They
me
make
by and
their own
large.
connections.
They do.
They make the, and but this part that you mentioned, and this is a little bit of that tacit knowledge here, I think,
Mm,
which is you go, well, I just set up time to meet with them, half an hour, one on one, whatever. um, I think that when people start, that's like super important.
mm,
Like to be able to just take the time to go in and do that. It
mm,
sounds like the unscalable thing to do
mhm.
because it's like you can't just send out one general message and everyone gets it and then like thousands of people like suddenly flock to your door. It
Yeah,
doesn't work that way, right?
yeah,
And it almost feels like, hey, if you want people to vote, if you're an organizer, a community
mhm,
organizer or an activist, you know, you got to go and knock on people's doors. You need to show up, right? And I think that that's something that uh, I think a lot of the successful people, that are in your role at various institutions, that's what they do. I remember Paul Wasco. We talked about him a lot. I'm gonna get him to come back on the show again,
yeah,
because he has so much to share. Um, I remember visiting him at University of Alaska. Of course, I got to take a trip to Alaska. Alaska was
yeah.
just amazing.
Sounds like a real tough work trip.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I had, like I met him in his office
Mm,
for about 2 minutes and then he goes, let's go walk. And so we walked around the campus and like we walked for probably 3 hours.
mm.
We walked for like hours. I was exhausted,
Yeah.
but it was amazing because he would just pop his head into, like, it was a big campus, multiple buildings. We were just walking like all over. He just pops his head in. He was welcome. Everyone likes him because I think he just had built those relationships,
Yeah.
and he introduced me to various folks, and he tells me about them, and I learned a little bit about each of the people that we met, and but that's the kind of relationship that you can't just build if you're thinking like, oh, I'm gonna spend most of my time in my office, um, writing up this manifesto on ePortfolio, thinking that I'm going to send this one email because I'm going to blast it to like 8,000 faculty members, and they're going to come like, then suddenly like I don't even have to do anything. Send them
Yeah.
one more
Right.
video, and then they'll just be completely self-sufficient. It really doesn't seem to work like that.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think, I will say one of the things we benefit from at Oxford is that, I mean, it's a small campus. We have about 1,000 students, and so we don't have that many faculty either.
So you
Um,
have the ability to go and
I
reach
have the
out to
ability
so
to
many.
walk, yeah, just like
Yeah,
walking down the quad, and
yeah.
so like I guess I could know everybody, and to be fair, I do send out email blasts because like
Mhm,
that's how the world works. But it's like the people who I hear back from are those folks that I get to see at a development workshop or at lunch or whatever because we have that community.
mhm,
It's really, I mean that. But those, all that is to say, those kind of like face-to-face relationships are what
mhm.
make the nitty-gritty, list serve emails worth it,
Yeah. But
and work.
here's a really interesting part. I'm going to make a parallel here. There's a real sort of business guru named Steve Blank,
Hmm,
and he had been he had a ton of success in the business world, and became sort of an educator teaching at Berkeley and Stanford. And he came up with he's really one of the founding the idea of like lean startup, which is
hmm,
what a lot of people have now heard of,
hmm,
was really from some of his work. And he came up with something called initially something called the I think it was called the business model canvas or something like that.
hmm,
And his for like so he typically worked with all these engineers students who are very, very smart. They're at Berkeley, they're at Stanford, they're extremely capable technologically and as an engineers. And his absolute first advice is to get out of the office, is to get out, because you need to go and talk to the people. So that's his brute force
hmm,
way
hmm,
of scaling. So people think, no, I want to scale my business to have millions of customers or billions of customers. If you look at like social media and so
hmm,
on, the entire idea is not how do I build this like platform that is like Facebook, and then suddenly it just sort of takes up. It doesn't work like that.
hmm.
You have to go out to people, and at some point though you do cross over, kind of like probably what you did, which is, hey, look, I met with enough people now. I have a little list that I can actually send out,
Yeah.
to them. But you now have a relationship. It's not just like some cold email.
Yeah.
So it also, I mean, it really works like that. um uh so I think that's, like I've seen you having this success, and I kept try to figure out, how can we share that with people on campuses that are, they're still trying to figure this out. Now, I think that you started with, you felt pretty lucky that in both organizations you've had good high level administrative support. So you're not going at it alone. You're not trying to have to convince someone that this is a good idea.
Yeah.
Um, what I mean, and I think that it is a really difficult uphill battle, for those who don't have that. Or you have some support. That's why it exists, but it's not at a level where they're willing to do curriculum level, thinking, with it. It's more
Yeah.
like, here's one of the 17 tools that you can use, and if you happen to, you know, kind of like it or have the time to play with it, go for it.
Yeah.
Right, and that's harder. It is way harder.
Right.
Um, what would be? I know that you didn't have that experience, but what would you do? What would you do to try to work with, a dean, a provost, etc., who's not on board, or
Hmm.
who's maybe a little bit on board? They're not saying no, but they haven't leaned into it.
Yeah.
What would you do? Because I know you're very creative, and I was wondering what your thoughts would be.
Man, I mean, and this is probably boring, as I would show them the research. I mean, that's the thing, is portfolios sell themselves,
Hmm.
that's that. If I were to, and to sell them as something that's part of a larger integrated curriculum, you know, they can't just be one part of a curriculum, right? They have to be kind of integrated to a whole one, which probably isn't a great selling point. Like you have to overhaul your curriculum, but and I guess that may not also be what I'm saying, but it's showing folks that when students have the chance to reflect and have ownership of their learning,
Hmm.
to kind of craft a story in a way that they see fit, like, we know that they retain knowledge better. We know that they are more likely to graduate. We know that
Hmm.
they're more successful, with grad school. And, like, I mean, to me, it's just the data on
Hmm.
them that sells them. And so, I think the approach to an administrator, that, I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
But all that said, when I say it has to do with larger curriculum, the point is never the portfolio. The point is always sort of the learning that happens. So
Right.
it's a matter of talking to folks about what a reflective and integrated curriculum looks like in the liberal arts. I think is the starting point.
I think that's really a great point because, um, I mean, in some ways, your highest level administrators, such as a provost, um, it is their business. Their business is to reinvent the curriculum and
Mhm.
iterate on it all the time.
Yeah,
Um, like, why else would they be doing this job?
yeah,
That's a big component to what they do. So it's not like I feel like if you're a provost or a dean and you're shying away from doing that, something's wrong.
sure,
Like, that's really a big part of the job.
yeah.
They Going back to ghosts, if you're a hunter and you are scared of them, then it doesn't work.
That
Like,
doesn't
you
work.
can't say,
That's
I
right.
don't go and do that. So that's that's the that's I think, but I think that having that right approach, that language of, you're not really trying to sell them on some platform or some technology, because it's not about that. It's
Mhm.
about an integrative and a reflective way, integrate and a reflection into the curriculum. I think is a good approach, and I actually really like, and I hope that you, once you publish this, will we'll either have another conversation, and we'll definitely share widely, as well, some of the idea of an anti-racist pedagogy, for example. I think that there is no school today. Um, well, I don't want to say no school, but many schools today are looking for
Yeah.
a ideas and solutions to what they see in on their own campuses, um, to address this issue. They
Mhm.
may or may not have exactly the same view as you do, or they may be. We've seen recently. What's happening at UNC Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
There could be a lot of other political, um, uh, influence and factors in play. But yet, I think that in the long run, it does feel like that the arc is going to bend towards justice,
Mhm.
and that there is going to be a general direction of what where this is going,
Yeah.
and that could be an extremely um, powerful idea in how we think about the ongoing development of pedagogy and how that might impact our curriculum.
Yeah, that's another place where that sort of early adopter question is important, in part
Mhm.
because racism, white supremacy, that sort of stuff can never be addressed if it's always people of color talking to white people. It has to be there has to be people of privilege talking to other people of privilege. That's how these conversations happen. And so having early adopters, even with any sort of anti-racist pedagogy, is critical. And making sure that your white faculty are invested is going to be the most powerful way to make change. And actually, the UNC Chapel Hill thing is interesting because
Mhm.
tenure was eventually offered
It was offered, yeah. Hmm.
because the faculty saw the problem.
Yes,
Now of course
yes.
the outcome's different,
Hmm.
probably for the best, but like um, you know that faculty are a powerful force on campuses, and,
Hmm.
and if you can start to get those early adopters, whether it's portfolios or whether it's dismantling white supremacy, I mean, yeah, that's your starting point.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and uh, I guess that is a some of the beauty of this. The higher education sort of structure of having a faculty having the kind of autonomy and power
Mhm.
that they do, and in that way, there's a lot of wisdom in that actually
Mhm.
that is well worth thinking about. All right, Peter, it is what a pleasure and honor
It's been
to
fun.
spend this time with you. And we've got to have more conversations like this. We look forward to the paper when it's peer reviewed and published. I think we can give it a plug. It will hopefully be in which journal?
International Journal of ePortfolio.
Excellent, and that's the journal that is peer reviewed and um, started by Eddie Watson, who's currently at AAC&U. We would we'll keep an eye on it, and definitely when that comes out, maybe we can have another conversation. But again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Congratulations on all your success, and let's talk again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, take care.
Digication Scholars Conversations is brought to you by Digication, a technology platform powering the most innovative ePortfolio programs in K-12 and higher education. Our website can be found at digication.com. This episode was produced by Drew Albanesius. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks for watching.